Jacksonville, the child was born but couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. The poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talked for hours. It was a barefoot history of this land of flowers.
The week that was on the 25th of August 2018, beaming from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. An interesting lineup this week. We have Uncle, of course, Karl Rove setting, I suppose you'd say, a marker on one of the major events last week. The Cohen plea bargain agreement, the Manford's guilty plea on roughly 8 out of 18 counts against him, basically around bank fraud, that sort of thing. And Uncle Karl is talking about the impact on the Trump administration. And we have another article of it H found, I think it's in the Atlantic, talking about DJ Trump and his followers and which direction they'll go in. We'll sort of review the article and talk a little bit about it. But primarily Manford's convictions there involving his tax evasion, etc., does not register much in the on the needle, so to speak, pushing the needle around. The Cohen case is a bit different because that's hush money. If you go back to Tricky Dicky, there was also some hush money involved in that particular case. Now, Uncle Karl will argue that, well, it was not a federal law violation because actually he was paying the money to keep his reputation intact, as DJ Trump, that is. That's an interpretation that would first have to play out with the prosecutors if they were charging someone there. Presidents, they don't charge with felonies, you deal with impeachment, which is a purely political process. We found that out the last go-round, so to speak, we had, where William Jefferson Clinton, Bill Clinton, was actually impeached by the House, went to a trial in the Senate, and of course the Democrats had enough horses there, as LBJ would say, to turn that impeachment back. And that was based upon statements that Bill Clinton had made in the Paula Jones lawsuit that she had sued Bill Clinton out of Arkansas. There were things involved there also, Whitewater. They had a special prosecutor. Starr was there investigating several things, Whitewater. That was primarily around something called the Ross law firm where Hillary Clinton worked, and Bill Clinton and various machinations involving some people in Arkansas was more the way that they did. I suppose if you would look at Uncle Karl's statement, how politics was done in Arkansas. which is how it is done in many, many small states, particularly southern type states like Arkansas. Is nothing out of the ordinary about that. There was a bank there, and I forget the fellow, he's dead now, that made loans to Bill Clinton based upon some properties at a place called Whitewater. At the time, we were in the land business right by Whitewater. Kind of interesting little note there. But kind of a situation there with those crimes. And, of course, the Monica Lewinsky case, where Clinton had said publicly that he had not had any affair with Ms. Lewinsky, which turned out to be absolutely false. But we didn't have fake news coming out at that time. The media reported, monopoly media, it pretty much was the ball game in those days. This is in the 90s. Reported it in a factual way. It sold a lot of newspapers when newspapers were still printing newspapers. People were interested in Monica Lewinsky in the Oval Office, a cigar, etc. And this guy now, Brett Kavanaugh, was part of Starr's office. Some would call his henchman. And he was very aggressive in that particular investigation. However, now he wrote in an article in the Law Journal, the Minnesota Law Journal, basically saying that a president is too busy and shouldn't be distracted by those types of legal actions. And this was a civil suit, 1983 84 type of lawsuit, because Bill Clinton was acting on a color. He was the governor in Arkansas. That was by Paula Jones. And most of the time, those lawsuits don't succeed as this one did. Bill Clinton ended up, incidentally, settling the lawsuit. Now, that is a different situation. But back to Kavanaugh and the postponing of these types of lawsuits until after the president has left office, which would mean that DJ Trump would be a very busy man after he leaves office, and there will be that eventuality for DJ Trump. No matter how many years he's there, if he's there 2 more years, or if he's there 6 more years, the lawsuits will add up, and DJ Trump will be, as they say, facing the music. And that was a big story last week. The other story that didn't have as much press came out of Iowa. DJ Trump tried to highlight it as Jesse Jackson would say, pimp the idea. Jesse always had a way with words, or actually Al Sharp. The Tibbles case, young college student abducted, murdered in Iowa, found in a cornfield. An immigrant was involved there. Big debate whether or not the gentleman in question, Rivera, was documented or not documented. That sort of went back and forth there. It's still a bit blurred. They're still doing an investigation to see if he was or was not documented. But nonetheless, DJ Trump had a rally, I believe it was in Charleston, West Virginia, and he brought that in, and the parents' comments, etc. The whole idea was to raise the awareness to hysteria level that immigrants are literally in the non-documented immigrants, that is, are in the country killing people. And this gentleman happened to be a Mexican national. Now, we'll be monitoring that in the coming weeks to see how it affect polling in Iowa. There's a governor's race in Iowa, and also it sort of seeped into the Senate race in Minnesota, and we'll be looking at polling there in Minnesota. If my mind is correct here, about 7-point difference of those candidates, Smith and Housley, I believe, is the Republican candidate, Smith being the replacement of Al Franken. What they're running now in this election is for the last 2 years of Al Franken's term. And the other big story was out of Ohio. The Republican candidate in a very heavy, I think we'll have some more on that in our coming stories there, but nonetheless it was a very small victory, about 1,600 votes. Finally the Republican won in a district that went for Trump, and historically this district goes back to the 70s. Republicans have held the district, and now the rematch this was to serve out until January. So the rematch is in November, when obviously more college students, etc., will be back, and so in other words, more voters in the circumference. So we'll see how that works out for Mr. O'Connor. And out of Texas, Beto O'Rourke, he's a congressman out of El Paso, Texas, running against Ted Lyon Cruz. That race started out, Ted Lyon Cruz was ahead by at least 20 to 15 points. Now it's down to 4 points in the last survey. So as one Texan told me, Texas is the key to a Democratic upsurge. Lyndon Johnson, of course, ran out of Texas, and Texas was Democratic. They were more middle of the road conservative Democrats. There were some that were not in that makeup, but if you are able to gain Texas, particularly, and it doesn't appear this will happen this time, Wheelchair Abbott is still there, but it's a weak governor operation in Texas. Valdez is still way behind, but as the Progressive People's Coalition bill, as they have built in the major cities of Texas, i.e. Houston and Dallas, Fort Worth area, and that goes down to San Antonio, etc., you start to whittle away at the massive rural vote as demographics change. The key, of course, in Texas is what the Latino population, which is, I think, roughly about 20% there, does. They tend to be a bit more conservative than Latino populations in other states. So that in itself plays in a scenario in Texas for the Democrats on a long-term basis. And also North Carolina, what happens in Arizona as it turns to be more Democratic. And at this time we remember Senator John McCain. He was a standard bearer of the Republican Party in 2008. Major disagreements with DJ Trump. In fact, he's banned DJ Trump from his funeral. He's taken himself off of his cancer regiments, in that he's in his 80s now and the end of the road. So he will be, as one will say, passing on very soon. We'll go first to Uncle Carl Rove as we set up our opening on the Cohen Manfred case there, and somewhere we have Uncle Carl. Uncle Carl is writing in the Wall Street Journal on the 22nd of August. The title here is Cohen Manfred and the Midterms. They show up every presidential campaign. He's talking about George Papadopoulos here. Self-promoters like Carter Page, and worse, gadflies like Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen. These gaffers attach themselves to campaigns to refresh their credentials so they can sell their services to foreign governments, political parties, and businesses looking to buy influence. Steppenhinger's hope to land a job in the West Wing, and not that possibly to cash in on their connections, as Lewinsky has done, being a lobbyist for AT&T. He was Corey Lewinsky was the manager one time of the Trump campaign. The consequence for President Trump of having people like this around him becomes clearer than ever on Tuesday, when the former chairman Manafort was found guilty. We talked about bank fraud, hiding in foreign banks there, and Cohen pled guilty to tax evasion, making false statements, and campaign finance violations. So, what's the literally political fallout from these these courtroom bombshells? First, full disclosure, when Mr. Manafort wrote Trump in the spring of 2016 to offer his assistance, he said, I was his blood enemy. By that, Manafort referred to the unsuccessful campaign he managed for my rival for the national chair of the college Republicans. Oh, okay. In 1973, Manafort must have an enormous capacity for grudges. I can't remember interacting with him after the campaign. I last saw him in 96 at the Republican convention. Following Monday's verdict, the president declared that the special counsel Robert Mueller's successful prosecution of Manafort had nothing to do with Russian collusion. Mr. Trump is right, and for now, only the special counsel report will settle that definitely. Since there's a reason to be skeptical of the collusion narrative, every presidential campaign leaks. Of course, this campaign leaks more than any in the history. It has, if it had been collusion, the public would likely know about it by now. Some of the defendants of the president dismissed dismissed Manafort Burkett as a witch hunt, and this is wrong and unwise. Mueller acted with his mandate, and Manafort was found guilty of failing to pay taxes on $30 million of income from consulting in the Ukraine, $18 million of which he spent on various things: real estate, homes, even clothing. Thus, they may be distressed by the notion of a 69-year-old Manafort spending decades in prison. Yeah, the Trump allies could spend their energy better by pointing out that the president was not involved in any schemes and was in fact used by him. Well, I'm not so certain about that one. Nonetheless, Cohen's guilty plea was more troubling for Trump, not simply because Cohen admitted to paying hush money to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, who claimed to have affairs with DJ Trump. Manafort now says that Trump directed him to make the payments to protect his election prospects, on an action some believe constitutes a violation of campaign finance laws. But many legal analysts, and this is pointed out, doubt the payments were illegal, including Bob Baer. He was a former White House counsel to Barack Obama and legal advisor to President Obama's campaign. In an article last month, Baer suggested that the question for legal purposes is whether Trump had made the payments, even if would have made the payments even if he had not been a candidate. The president, he believes, does not have to deny that politics played some part in his and Cohen's plotting. Reverend Mr. Baer argues that Trump's desire to protect his personal reputation, that gets a little bit complicates the campaign finance question. A dual motive is enough to muddy the legal waters. Unable to prove that payments were made solely for political purposes, it is unlikely that the prosecutor would proceed with a charge. that is just pure speculation. Prosecutors tend to proceed with a lot of charges. Their job is to present the evidence. Juries, judges, etc. decide the merits of the case. And if there's probable cause there, a prosecutor, it's been said, could charge a ham sandwich. So nothing new there at all. Let's move on here. Where are we going here? Washington Post, Trump said it's probably tough for GOP to retain the House control of the House. Trump is pictured here with some little children. He's in Columbus, Ohio. He acknowledged probably a tough path to retain the GOP control of the House as the state party's annual dinner here, interjecting some political reality into standard rhetoric that boasts of a red wave in November. When we used to hear about the blue wave, the first time the red wave. He traveled to Ohio on Friday to rally the state party that has faced internal strife, most notably high-profile rip between the president and the governor, John Kirsch. The governor skipped it. He didn't even show up. I think in the Senate we're doing well. We're going to win a lot of seats, Trump said in his speech. He said Rob Portman listed name after name of Republican candidates who are doing great as they challenge Democratic senators. But Trump noted the House is probably tough. He blamed the internal House Republican conference rules that impose a 6-year term limit on holding chairmanships, while Trump speculation was driving several veteran lawmakers out of office. 8 Republican chairs are retiring this year. Now, this is the issue of term limits. The Republicans have championed term limits to their supporters. The whole idea of throw the rascals out. And now that they're in leadership, they backtracked on that. But in some instances, on state level, people are term limited. And a lot of people think that. And the reason they do that is they were looking at Democrats who held chairships and who were in office for very long periods of time. That was basically it. I guess it's other people up there, but in the midtime, we have a lot of chairmen that have no choice but to leave. The bulk of the 54-minute long speech there was a standard campaign stump speech with heavy focus on the economy, immigration, and trade. I think if I were him, I'd leave the trade out. But he lived with a much more subtle tone to fit the atmosphere of the formal gala dinner. At the start of the dinner, he signaled out the great representative Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan, incidentally, is involved in the Ohio State mess, who came on to fire accusations that he turned a blind eye to abuse by wrestlers at Ohio State. Don't ever wrestle him. Trump said, he won't go into this goofiness here. He slammed Richard Corey. Richard Corey used to be at the Financial Protection Agency, former director of Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, who railed as a far-left candidate. He's not a far-left candidate. And a racial slur in reference to groomed by Pocahontas. That's to Elizabeth Warren. He voted no line against the Democratic candidate, this time Sherrod Brown, who is being challenged by Representative Renazzi. Sherrod Brown voted no on our tax cuts. Yeah, he wasn't very good at doing that. Anyway, he didn't mention John McCain's family announced Friday he was ending his medical treatment. John Kirsch also went unmentioned there. Kirsch has been feuding since the 2016 election. The close contest we talked about, that is in the Columbus area, that was Tory Balderson was declared the winner, about 1,600 votes there. O'Connell earlier Friday and the First Lady tried to reject the uniform front in a week of guilty pleas there of coin, etc. And these payoffs have been First Lady toured neonatal unit at Nationwide Children's Hospital. That's the picture we see here. And let's see to the Post. Rudy Giuliani is right, according to this is a political analysis. The Trump impeachment would likely spur some type of revolt. This is from Philip Bump. Sky News caught up with Rudy Giuliani on a golf course in Scotland. Giuliani was asked about the subject Trump himself addressed. The interview aired on a Fox News on Thursday. Impeachment was impeachment eventually invincibly following the president's former lawyer Cohen's revelations in court that Trump asked him to pay hush money. Hardly, Trump replied, Giuliani replied, Cohen, he said, is a massive lie. Well, the defense lawyer would frame it that way. He asserted that Trump had been completely cleared. First impeachment is dearly a political process. Yes, it is. That we know, and the sentencing body is, of course, the Senate. The House wants to impeach Trump tomorrow. They could do it as could have any number of houses for other presidents at any broad time. Well, no doubt about that. They could. They usually don't use impeachment. Revolt is a strong word, and the American people is openly bored, but a substantial number of Americans would certainly take strong issue with an impeachment effort against Trump for two reasons. They don't think the actual warrants impeachment, or they aren't aware of the full scope of the allegations. We'll consider a poll here. This is from the Huffington Post. YouGov found that half of the Americans believe Cohen and former campaign manager done things wrong. Strangely worded. Be very, very skeptical of these strangely worded polls here. That we'll find out more at a later date. Let's just say that. Last year, the Associated Press spoke with Trump supporters to get a sense of how they react to the movement. One woman on Staten Island summarized what is likely a common response. I tuned it out. I don't want to feel that he's not doing what he said he's doing. I just choose not to listen. Okay. So basically that, the head in the sand situation there. Fox and Friends downplayed the legal news in its promotional video. Well, anyway. For time, the Waco comments by the Democratic governor. Yeah, you know, we see that sort of thing going on here. We'll come back to this story. Let's see if I don't think we have it here. Thousands of Amazon workers receive food stamps. Now Bernie Sanders wants Amazon to pay. We'll soon, Senator Sanders of Vermont will soon introduce legislation that will require large employers like Amazon, Walmart, and McDonald's to fully cover the costs of food stamps, public housing, Medicaid, and other federal assistance received by their workers. The goal, he says, is to force the corporations to pay a living wage and curb roughly $150 billion in taxpayer dollars that currently go to funding federal assistance for low-wage workers each year. The bill, which Sanders plans to introduce in the Senate on the 5th of September, would impose a 100% tax on government benefits received by workers at companies with 500 or more workers. For example, Amazon worker receives $300 in food stamps. Amazon would be taxed $300. Public records obtained by the New Food Economy, as a nonprofit organization, shows that thousands of Amazon workers rely on government supplemental nutrition assistance. As many as 1 in 3 workers at Amazon, about 1 in 10 in Pennsylvania and Ohio, receive food stamps. That was an April report there. Amazon spokesman said the figures were misleading because they include people who only work for Amazon for short periods of time or who chose to work part-time. Sanders' bill would extend of a petition started extension by the calling on the world's richest man, Bezos, to pay workers a living wage. He owns, incidentally, the Washington Post. Bezos is the most egregious example of the Walton family and other billionaire-run operations. He's currently worth $157 billion, up from $99 billion a year ago. That's according to the Bloomberg Billionaire Index. The median worker at Amazon was paid $28,000 last year, according to the following the federal poverty level, and this is very, very distorted. For a family of 4 is $24,000. Impossible for a person to a family of 4 to live on that type of income. Utterly impossible. Etchers of Amazon said the company has created more than 30,000 new jobs with highly competitive pay and full benefits in the last year. She added that the average wage for full-time workers in the warehouse is more than $15 an hour. Well, it is more than $15 an hour. But slave working conditions there. Amazon reported profits of $300.3 billion last year, 3.3 billion last year, as sales climbed 31% to $178 billion. So now we'll go back to where we were. This is from Reuters. Democrats face impossible map to retake the Senate. A picture here of Beto O'Rourke in Texas. Democrats are defending 24 seats this cycle, 10 in states that DJ Trump won. Stu Rosenberg, I don't use him very much. He tends to be a conservative analyst. Called the Senate landscape almost impossible map for Democrats, adding, given the headwinds facing Republicans, the Senate that could be in play. Well, we'll see on that one. The Democratic National Committee is doing their summer meeting in Chicago, and strategy winning back the Senate, which Democrats last controlled in 2014. Now, these are some problematic states here: West Virginia, Indiana, with the sheriff there in North Dakota, Montana, and Missouri. Our own Claire McCaskill. Claire McCaskill has a possibility of retaining her seat in, as we see it, in Missouri. Also, Senator Meacham in West Virginia because of her own popularity. And in North Dakota, Heidi can't. Well, let's be interesting in North Dakota. I give that about a 50-50 chance there. Montana, we'll see. Indiana, well, no bets on that one right now. Look at some polling. Now, opinion surveys show toss-up races in North Dakota, Indiana, and Missouri, and Montana, which Trump carried by 20 percentage points. Incumbent Democratic Senate. This is John Tesler, led in recent polls by an average of 5 percentage points. John Tesler is, I think, was an organic farmer at one time. Big, burly fellow, relates to the working class very good. West Virginia, wouldn't worry about that. Trump carrying West Virginia. There are 5 states clearly the high targets of Republicans. This is Jeffrey Skelly, nonpartisan, University of Virginia Center for Politics. The crystal ball, of course, honor Heather Heyer there. There are 2 ways to look at the Senate map. It's really bad for Democrats, but the flip side is this isn't a perfect year for them is a perfect year for them to be defending it. Well, yeah, it is a better year depending on which states obviously you're in. Florida Senate fight that concerns some Democrats. Now, yeah, we talked about that last night. Bill Nelson there behind on this is a Florida Atlantic University poll by 6 points to Scott. In Arizona, Jeff Flick is retiring. Retiring. Yeah. On the Democratic side, Kirsten Sinema leads in the poll. She's been leading. Heller, Dean Heller, is considered the most vulnerable Republican around. He could be disappearing. So some of the things going on here, out here, Labor Day officially kicks things off. We'll see how it works. Critical issues, of course, like healthcare. Healthcare is a very good issue. Tax cuts, people have sort of forgot about the tax cuts. They got the money back in April, May, and some later in June. They've long since spent that, and it's normalized in their income regimen. So another big thing coming up here is at Jackson Hole there was some speeches there. The Fed chair basically said they're going to raise the interest rates because, and we'll talk about this on numbers, man, the flattening of the yield curve, low unemployment, inflation would creep up 25 basis points in September and probably another 25 basis points in December. And next year, some more raises. Bullard, he's at the St. Louis Fed, said possible recession. The problem there is that the type of economy that's running right now is it becomes more of the DJ Trump economy, exiting the Barack Obama economy. The types of recessions, we saw that with G.W. Bush. Of course, we got a depression. But recession would not be out of the question. It's one of those things that happen in this type of industrial capitalist economy. You're going to have recessions. You have the bull market on the stock exchange, etc. So a lot of dynamics coming in if you have a recession. We'll talk about it on numbers, man. Let me just check our time here. We're not running too badly here on this. And let me just check very quickly. What else do we have? Oh, the prison strike. We don't want to forget that. This is out of Arizona. The prison strike exposed concerns about Hawaiian inmates held in Arizona. Didn't know about that one. Inmates are striking across the country to make their voice heard after several inmates died and a riot that's in South Carolina. Prisons started a strike on Tuesday and will end on the 9th of September, according to Jailhouse Lawyers. Speaker network of imprisoned inmate rights advocates. That was in USA Today. This is a USA Today paper. Appreciative of USA Today covering this. Supporters of the strike have taken to social media to show support, amongst them a student in Hawaii who focused on many of his posts on Hawaiian inmates being housed in Arizona. Now, I'm not sure why this is. This is the Staguro Correctional Institute. Etong is a PhD student at the University of Hawaii. And tweeted about prisoners. It's a privately held multi-security level facility in Elroy, Arizona. It's run by Tennessee Core Civic, which runs correctional detention and transition facilities across the country. There are 6 Core Civic properties in Arizona. Hawaii pays the company to house some of its inmates. Mr. Tong first received more than 3,000 retweets. I'll get it right in a minute. And more than 5,000 likes. It's solidarity with the prisoner strike here. The thread about the 1,500 Pashikan, the majority of Hawaiians incarcerated inmates are locked up in the Segura Correctional Facility for profit place there. And in solidarity, this is Mr. Tong. They is a thread about 1,000 Pais. Kwani, the majority of Hawaiians incarcerated there. I've not heard of that group, but the Fred in the Fred, the choreographing student mentioned the documentary film Out of the State. The film shows the journey of Native Hawaiians transitioning from being the best behind bars in Arizona to going home to Hawaii. To Hawaii. Mr. Tong tweeted, no amount of cultural programming justifies inmates working on the wages of 15 to 50 cents per hour. This is kind of human trafficking, is the new blackbirding in the age of anti-black incarceration. And it demands, we have those incidentally up to immediate improvement to conditions of prisons and policies, and immediate end to prison slavery, a recession of the Truth in Sentencing Act and the Sentencing Reform Act, an immediate end to racial discrimination in charging, sentencing, and parole denial proceedings, an immediate end to gang enhancement of laws that discriminate against minorities, funding for state prisons to offer additional rehabilitative services, a reinstatement of the Pell Grants. Now, that was very important because inmates or prisoners could literally go to college using Pell Grants at one time, and many did. I talked to a fellow that got 2 paralegal certificates, or one paralegal and another certificate using a Pell Grant. Voting rights for all confined citizens serving prison sentences, pretrial detainees, and ex-felons. So this is a very nice article from Arizona Central out of Phoenix, Arizona. They're in Elroy, Arizona is where these defendants are being held. We got this in. Let's do the baseball scores. We have that. This was on Friday the 24th. The Brewers finally won that game over the Pirates in Milwaukee, 7-5. The Brewers had 13 hits, 2 errors, and the Pirates had, and that's in 15 innings, the Pirates had 17 hits and 1 error. Very long game. The Astros and Angels in California. Astros 9-3. Astros had 9 hits, 1 error, and the Angels 7 hits and no errors. A game we tuned into, the Padres and Dodgers in Los Angeles. 11-5 was the score. 11-1, excuse me. The Dodgers had 15 hits and no errors, and the Padres 4 hits and 2 errors. And in 16, another very, very long game here. The Rangers and Giants, it ended up a 1-run game. The Rangers are 7-6. Giants have lost a lot of close ones. The Rangers had 10 hits and no errors, and the Giants had 11 hits and 1 error. Another 10-inning game in Wrigley Field. The Reds and Cubs, finally 3-2 was the score. Cubs had 7 hits, 1 error, and the Reds 4 hits and no error. Another 10-inning game. The Yankees were in Camden Yard. Yankees pulled that one out 7-5. The Phillies and Blue Jays in Toronto. Blue Jays are 4-2. The White Sox and Tigers in the Motor City. Two teams that are going nowhere. 6-3 was the score. White Sox over the Tigers. Everyone's beating up on the poor Tigers lately. The Nationals and Mets in New York. The Mets shut the Nationals out. 3-0. Atlanta and the Marlins in Florida. Atlanta was blanked by the Marlins 1-0. The Marlins had 3 runs and no errors, and Atlanta 3 runs and 1 error. The Red Sox were in Florida and wish they would have stayed in Boston. Rays 10-3 in that contest. The Sox had 13 hits, no errors, and the Rays had 12 hits and no errors and still pulled the game out. A regular game there. The Athletics and Twins in Minnesota. It was the Athletics 7-1. They had 10 hits and 1 error, and the Twins 5 hits and 1 error there. And was it Paul? I think it was Paul Mullinger. I'll have to look that one up. Got his 3,000 whatever hit. Second only to Kirby Puckett. In Cleveland was in Kansas City 5-4, and the Cardinals were in Denver and pulled it off 7-5 over the Rockies. And finally, the Mariners and D-backs in the desert. Mariners 6-3. Let me check quickly here on that Mullinger score. I think it was Mullinger. Let me make sure I get that right. Yeah, Mullinger makes history there. Let's see what he did. Yeah, his 5th inning standing ovation at 2,086 career hit. So that's what he made there. So it's Muller, Paul Muller. Played into his 40s, he would have a double about that. But anyway, second only to Kirby Puckett. So he could surpass Kirby Puckett. And I think Kirby Puckett, where was Kirby Puckett in this scenario? I read this earlier. Well, anyway, Kirby Puckett, late Kirby Puckett, I should say, collected more hits. I don't see it in this article. But anyway, nonetheless, our Cubs cap is off to him. This will do it for us. We'll see you on Monday morning, the Monday morning quarterback. And we'll see it with special programming tomorrow on Sunday. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you Monday morning. Program. Good day.